All right, excellent. Well, students from South Carolina, welcome to We the People Nationals Day 2. We're really delighted to see you. This is Unit 3. My name is Emily Voss. I am the We the People Coordinator for Virginia. And in just a moment, I will hand things over to your judges. They'll introduce themselves and then they'll ask you to do the same. And then you all know this backwards and forwards, but we'll go ahead and read you the question and then you'll proceed with your 4-minute response and the judges will ask you follow-up questions from there. So like I said before, they're very nice people. They'll eager to have a good conversation. I'll also be your timekeeper. And if it happens that you are mid-sentence or mid-thought when I hold up time, please go ahead and feel free to finish your thought, okay? So I will go ahead now and hand things to the judges.
Unmute here. Okay, well, welcome South Carolina. It's always good to see people from another part of the state here. As I said, we'll introduce ourselves. And I do appreciate you wearing a Georgia Bulldog shirt also, because even though I'm in South Carolina, that's where I went to school. My name is Joe Stewart. I believe I've probably seen you before. I teach at Clemson University when I'm not judging We the People, which I do every year, and very much involved with the program. Relax, enjoy yourself. We're going to learn from you and have a good time today.
I'm Mike Miles from Birmingham, Alabama. I understand the University of South Carolina has a brand new football coach, and Clemson has one who was born 10 minutes from where I live. So Dabo and I know each other. And so y'all are covered well in both cases. The good news, Dr. Rogers, is that when they get through answering our questions, it appears they can give us a concert from what's in the background. Which one of you is the drummer? That's you. I wish I could play the drums. Teach me how to do that. I'd be happy for so long if I could do that. So just be ready when we're through. Dr. Don.
Hi, I'm Donald Rogers. I teach history, or I used to teach history at Central Connecticut State University until I retired recently. I've been involved in We the People many years. It's a great program, great you're part of it. And I like the fact you're presenting yourself as a team rather than boxes on the screen. So we get to see how you interact as a team. And by the way, you can smile. You have these anxious looks on your faces. You don't need them. So just relax and share your knowledge, and we'll all have a good time.
Please introduce yourselves and Mr. O'Hare.
I'm Colt Muszynski. I'm a senior at Wilson Hall.
I'm Caitlin Smith, and I'm also a senior at Wilson Hall.
My name is Warren Joliker. I'm a senior at Wilson Hall as well.
And your teacher is?
Tom O'Hare.
Okay. Tom is hiding from me. He's probably seen me enough over the years. So.
Yeah, they told me to hide the video. Yes, sir, Dr. Stewart. We've had you many times at the state competition. They told me to hide the video. They said I was ugly, I guess. But
yeah. Well, it's Emily is recording this for posterity. We're trying to decide whether or not it will go viral. So look for that on news coverage here. Okay, as you know, we're going to cover question 2 today. So I will read the question so that we'll have the recording of it, and then we'll listen to your response. It's a quote from John Adams. "There is nothing I dread so much as a division of the Republic into 2 great parties, each arranged under its leader and in opposition to each other. What issues led to the formation of the original political parties? To what extent have those issues persisted in American political parties? What are the advantages and disadvantages of a unified or divided government?" You may begin.
Okay, so the political parties, they developed within a decade of the ratification of the Constitution due to differing opinions about the powers and desired strength of the national government. The Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, wanted a more strong and centralized government, while Thomas Jefferson and the Republicans strove for states' rights and a less involved national government. Each side simply interpreted the Constitution in different ways. The main example of this was the dispute over the creation of the National Bank. Hamilton justified the bank as being necessary and proper and is protected by the elastic clause in Article 1, Section 8. Jefferson and the strict interpretationalists highly disagreed with this decision because they believed the elastic clause should be used for matters absolutely necessary, and the bank was not. After this, more dispute emerged from the Alien and Sedition Acts when the U.S. almost indulged in war with France around 1800. The laws were an act from the Federalists against the Democratic Republicans because it limited freedom of speech and the freedom of press. This overall caused major controversy and further distinguished and separated the parties. Regarding the political parties in today's society, to this day, people have always disagreed about the powers of the state and national government and how the Constitution should be interpreted. So there will always be political parties, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Republicans have always had different ideals and priorities than Democrats, and with most laws that pass through Congress, one side usually disagrees. A strong example of this being the recent election, where there was a strong division between the parties and the violence that erupted from that, like the storming of the Capitol building. Also, in the last presidency with Obama, the parties had a similar dispute to Obamacare as the creation of the national bank. Liberals felt it was necessary for the government to be largely involved in the nation's healthcare, while the Republicans felt it isn't the proper role of our government, and it is a stretch on what the Constitution permits. In addition to the controversy on the role of our national government, there have been many instances of state rights versus Supreme Court that separate the parties as well. For example, the constitutionality of school prayer was decided by the case Engel versus Vitale after much controversy between the parties. Roe versus Wade also speaks for itself on the division between the ideals and differing opinions of the parties that still occur today.
Alrighty, the advantages and disadvantages of a unified government. So there have only been 2 presidencies with an actual unified government. I would say George Washington and a presidency during the era of good feelings. The most obvious advantage of having a unified government is the ability to achieve your objectives. For example, if a party wanted to pass a bill through Congress, they could do it relatively easily and with no issue. The disadvantage of a unified government is that the other political party has effectively no say for at least 2 years. If there is true unity, however, or only one political party, people will be forced to think on every issue and not conform to specific political lines. However, there are no restrictions on parties. That is the beauty and the disadvantage of a freedom of speech. Human nature loves to split us up into different sides of an argument, right or wrong, black or white, left or right. The advantages of a divided government, however, lie in compromise. If a party wants to pass a bill and the government is in a gridlock, each side will need to make compromises on a more centrist bill will be formed where actually most of the people lie. A divided government requires compromise or nothing occurs, which is usually what happens. The disadvantage of a divided government is the fact that log rolling and pork belly and all those other types of spending more money than when it's not really necessary happens a lot more. Bills are constantly loaded with riders and unnecessary pork, wasting valuable taxpayer money. In either form of government, however, the most important aspect is self-restraint. Self-restraint in considering the other side and self-restraint from adding too much pork.
Okay, well, we've got the time, so we're going to have to move on to the questions now. And let me begin by, you mentioned the concepts of compromise and gridlock. When will we get compromise and when will we get gridlock? Those are 2 possible outcomes that we could get with divided government.
Compromise and gridlock both occur when you have, for example, in the House, the House is Republican and then the Senate is Democratic. And that forces both sides to figure out how a bill is going to get passed, or else it dies, which is what usually happens.
My friend who's sitting here with me says that there's something I don't know about called social media. There's Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter and some words I've never heard before, but she says that people your age know about them and listen to them sometimes. Do the echo chambers of social media and the echo chambers of TV shows that are not TV shows, TV stations, MSNBC on the one hand, Fox on the other, depending on what waiting room you go in to sit down. Do those things make compromise and bipartisanship almost impossible because of how they inflame each side?
I would agree with that 100% because each separate news station appeals to one side of the voters, appeals to one party more specifically, and it may twist the words a little bit just to maybe twist the truth. It's like fake news. It's not necessarily fake news, it's just exaggerated in certain ways to appeal to one side more than the other. So it's hard to agree with the middle. It's hard to go down the middle line and agree with everyone and make everyone happy.
So is that their fault? The echo chambers' fault? Is that their fault or is it our fault? We listen to them, we turn them on. Is that our fault or theirs?
I think it's our fault, to be honest. I think it's human nature. We like to be right. We like to listen to the side that agrees with us.
Yep.
And listening to that opposing side is hard. Hearing that you may be wrong is hard. But it's incredibly important for debate. And social media has allowed us, its beauty is that you can search whatever and find whoever group you are looking for. But also, and in finding your own group, a lot of people get into that echo chamber and they only allow themselves into that group. And sadly, compromise is hurt in the end.
Tom, when we're through here today, would you make this group available to travel around the country to high schools in all 50 states? Say those 3 speeches all over again, just like they said them. Dr. Rogers?
Have there been occasions in American history where the political party system has simply broken down and basically failed to do its job?
Can you repeat the question?
Right. Have there been occasions in American history when the political party system has failed? It's broken down.
I would say that the party system has ever failed, and like in times of struggle, like during 9/11, the two parties came together under one and they put out bipartisan ideals and they put out bipartisan bills and whatnot. And the country was able to come together. So whenever it's in times of like really hardship, like under FDR, the New Deal, many of the bills and laws that were passed were very liberal, but the country knew deep down that it needed to be done. And everyone came together under one and did what was needed to do.
I'm going to disagree with that. I think the political party has failed in certain aspects. I think Reconstruction is a prime example when essentially one party was totalitarian in nature and completely disallowed, I believe, the Southern Democrats from voting in any sort of way. And, post-Civil War, that's how it was for the next, 20-ish years, I would say, as Reconstruction was going on. So I think that's definitely one of the historical failures of the political party.
When you talk about divided government, I think you mentioned the executive branch and the legislative branch. What about the judicial branch? Should we be considering the courts as part of divided government or unified government?
We actually talked about this yesterday in our first question, but I think with the judicial branch, it was made for it to be completely independent and not to be divided with parties or anything like that, because it wasn't an elective process by the people. But I think it can be seen a little bit as having an influence of political parties, but I think the main goal is for it to be independent.
It's one of the dangers of the judiciary, and it's one of the pitfalls that we shouldn't fall into. I mean, theoretically, we shouldn't fall into political parties either, as John Adams said, but shame.
It's just, how
Shame.
human nature is.
Emily, where are we on time? Are we
1:45.
minute 45? Okay.
Well, let me follow up on that, Mike, unless you've got a.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Because I want to follow up on, I teach courses on the court. So are there better ways than you indicated it's not the way things are, but the way you think it ought to be? Are there ways that we could produce a judiciary that would be more in line with what you would like to see?
I don't I don't think the judiciary has strayed very far from where it's supposed to be. I think the issue with Congress, for example, or the Senate is the amount of members each has. There are what 435 or 436,
Yeah.
435, sorry, members in Congress and 100 members in the Senate. It's very hard to have 435 people in a room together and ask them not to be divided on any issue down flat lines. When you have 8 people whose sole goal is to be
9 people.
9, sorry, 9 people whose
Good teamwork.
goal is to be bipartisan, that's much easier.
And even then, there's still a majority and a dissenting opinion on almost every single case. You hardly ever get one side that gets a unanimous decision.
What about third parties? Would they make an improvement in our party system?
I think third-party ideals, it forces the 2 majority parties to consider some of the aspects that the third party is trying to implement, but the third party was never going to be a mainstream thing. It's just the way that our country's built.
Well, thank you. Our time is up, so thank you for your work here. I appreciate your insights on this. This is always an important topic, even though we're in a state where there's not a whole lot of party competition. When I have students come to me, particularly during presidential races, and say they want to play a role in presidential campaign, I tell them to go either up to North Carolina or now over to Georgia, and there they could participate in a campaign where they might make a difference. In South Carolina, as I told my students in 2008, if they turned on the TV on the night after the election and saw that Barack Obama had carried South Carolina, they should turn off the TV and go to their favorite watering hole and either drown their sorrows or celebrate, depending on who they were backing in the race. But there's still these important issues about partisanship that affect our lives. And I appreciate the effort that you put into wrestling with these issues. And I guarantee you are way ahead of the average citizen in our state. So congratulations. And I don't mean to down my faint praise on that either. So you have done a good job with this. And I appreciate the effort and Mr. O'Hare's efforts in getting you to this point. Thank you.
No kidding. I agree with what Joe said. I think it's going to be harder for y'all. As I said, we had daily newspapers. If we cared enough to read them, newspapers, Joe, would endorse candidates for public office. And if you liked that newspaper, we used to see people, I ran political campaigns for a long time, and we would see people come into the polling place with their local newspaper folded up under their arm, the editorial page, because they were going to pull that out and vote for whoever the paper said. They at least had one source that they trusted. I know you get sick of hearing this. I used to get sick when somebody would say this to me. You've got stuff that I didn't have to wade through. It's not the fact that you've got social media sites, it's which one you pick. Unless you pick more than one, you're going to get a steady dose just like the TV stations give. And it makes it hard to work through all that. My generation did not make it easy for people my age to pick through the partisanship and pick the best person involved and all of that. Maybe your generation can do that, but it ain't going to be easy. But what I told the group a little while ago was, and I still believe this, political parties stink. They're corrupt, they're inefficient, they cost too much money, they raise too much money, they turn on people that have helped them, they're mean to them. But go join one, because the political parties are going to pick who gets nominated. The political parties are going to pick who wins. If you decide you want to be involved in setting public policy, it's going to take a political party to put you in that place, because factions can help a little, but they can't quite get you there. When you get ready to run the train. Find a local political party that you think is closer to what you think and get in it and reshape it a little bit and make them agree with, make them adopt the issue you care about. And that's how you can change things. But as Dr. Stewart said, you know so much more about this, so much more about this than the people your age in his state and mine know, that puts a little responsibility on you. Fortunately, you have Tom O'Hare to call from time to time and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I tell you, he'll have an opinion about it and he'll tell you what it is. This was fun today. Thank you a lot. Dr. Rogers.
I enjoyed your presentation. You covered all the parts of the question. You had a good opening, teasing out the issues that divided the parties in the 1790s. Mentioned the Alien Sedition Acts. I think was especially a good piece of evidence to add. You had some good points to make about the advantages and disadvantages of united government or divided government. On social media, one thing you might have considered is that political newspapers in the past were perhaps as partisan as the social media today.
Yeah.
Particularly if you go to the 1790s. The 1790s were actually very divided, despite the presidency of George Washington. And that's one of the reasons why Washington decided not to run again. He didn't want to run in 1792. And he definitely didn't want to run in 1796. And the reason is because of the rife partisanship, and the newspapers were part of that. And so the social media phenomenon we have today is not entirely new. Good points on when the party system failed. You have an interesting example with Reconstruction. And from the perspective of South Carolina, it makes sense to say, well, the Reconstruction era was one in which the system wasn't fair, because there were questions about whether Democratic representatives were going to be added to Congress. They're badly outnumbered, and so there's not much compromise between the two sides then. And if the parties had been more evenly matched, as they were in the presidential election, of 1876, then we might have seen more conflict. So I thought that was a good example. I'm sorry we didn't have more time on the third parties. I thought you were off onto a good answer, saying that, well, our system doesn't make room for third parties, but it educates the two major parties to things they might want to pick up. And that's a really good opening. And you could have turned to some examples of the Populist Party, for example, of the 1890s, most of whose platform was absorbed by the Democratic Party. So that was the beginning of a really good answer. So a lot of good points. You just got started. We didn't have enough time. That's a sign of a good presentation.
And let me finish